Hello, and welcome back to the Wallfacer Labs podcast. Today's guest is Evgeny Yurtaev, the co-founder and CEO of Zerion. Zerion is a crypto wallet for everything Onchain. Zerion's also recently announced that they're building Zero, a layer 2 network that's designed to offer zero fees. Evgeny, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Glad to be here, and hello to everybody listening and potentially viewing.
Absolutely. So I'd like to try and break this up into a few sections, probably kick off with a bit on Zerion, the product, the business, and then spend the bulk of the time on Zero, which I think is what most people will be excited to learn about. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. Happy to jump right in.
Cool. Well, so I will assume most people listening are familiar with Zerion, since I think we have a more crypto native audience. You've been, in the seat of building Zerion as a portfolio tracker, now a wallet, for several years now. And I think in that time, the design space of what a wallet is has changed. In your mind, what are the key components of a modern wallet, and how does Zerion approach building?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we can start with the evolution of the crypto wallets. I think a lot of the earlier wallets started as just simple interfaces to signing messages, and that was really the start of, like, say, Metamask as the first and the most, I guess, popular still wallet in the space. But slowly over time, the complexity of using a crypto wallet was increasing. So not only the number of different assets started to grow quite significantly, but at the same time, a lot of the dApps that people use and the types of protocols that people have, and NFTs, and all of the different narratives and types of content really started emerging. And for the crypto wallet, it became moved away from just being a place where you store some of your crypto and kind of never touch it. It became an interface that you use daily for most of us in crypto to really interact with everything that is happening on chain. And I think that's the reality still right now. And this is how the most crypto native users, how they are interacting with the on-chain world, is through a dApp browser or through an extension. And I think for the wallets, it really became a big challenge, and including ourselves. Like, we started really as a portfolio tracker and DeFi aggregator, but was basically pretty soon noticed that it's just not enough because we don't control the flow of the transaction from the initiation on the dApp until the user signs it. So as a dApp, you can do only as much in terms of helping the user navigate the complexity. So we could only do, show how many tokens you have, like where do you stake your ETH, and what kind of transactions you did last week. But that's about it. And all of that, we realized, becomes an integral part of the wallet experience, which also includes transactions, security on the everyday interactions that you're having. So all of that became like components of the modern wallet. And I'm not even touching on some of the account obstruction stuff and some of the embedded wallets and social logins and everything else. But I'm just mainly talking about universal wallets here.
Yeah, we can come back to all of the fancy technical stuff in a bit, but actually I've watched a couple talks you've given just talking about the same thing, the kind of evolution of Zerion and maybe from a more product philosophy, how you think about it. And the one analogy that I heard you make was something that a wallet is like a combination of almost email and web browsers. You kind of talked about identity management, spam filtering, some of these stuff. Can you expand more about how you've kind of come to thinking about wallets and these interfaces in this form?
Yeah, so this is exactly how we saw the space evolving, and I think comparing wallets to browsers is the first thing that comes to mind. We just saw that it was an obvious analogy in our minds, because once we've integrated the dApp browser into Zerion, most of the transactions, actually, I think it's over 80% of transactions are happening on the dApp browser / on the extension right now. So very few people actually use the standard functions of the wallet because for that, there are many other ways to do that. You can do that on the exchange if you want to just trade tokens, or if you want to send the tokens to a friend. All of that is still happening, but it's only a small portion of overall activity that people are interested in doing. And from that perspective, the analogy with the browser made a lot of sense. And we are obviously in the Web3 space, even though this term is kind of dated at this point. And on top of that, the email came from the source of truth understanding, because your browser just by itself is a more stateless interface. So it doesn't really do much outside of presenting the content that you're browsing, versus email is where a lot of the stuff lands eventually in one form or the other. And this is how you like basically compile your identity from these pieces sitting in different services. So like email is the ground truth. And the universal wallets of the crypto space in some part became that, because you can use Farcaster, for example, and your identity is connected to your wallet, and that's the whole social graph and like all of the friends who follow you there. On the other node, you can have your staking protocol also connected to your wallet identity. And all of that lives kind of in the same place, which is your public key. And that's why wallets have to adapt to support this, like, I guess, multifaceted journey that you had through the crypto space.
Right. So that's I guess, interesting, and maybe like, in my mind, kind of consumer-ish philosophy of this kind of, I think maybe you called it browser first, finance second, thinking about how users interact with these applications. Something I've noticed just in being a beta user of a lot of apps is it seems like that's kind of I think maybe you guys were early to that, but I think that's now kind of consensus. Like, I think especially as you mentioned with the advent of Farcaster and some of these on-chain feeds, it feels like a lot of these applications now are showing this feed of your users first. I've used things like 0x, People, PPL, Floor, some of these new apps. Like, that's definitely their focus. How do you guys think about that becoming consensus? And, I guess, how does like the advent of more people using these features impact your roadmap and what you guys are thinking about next on the product side?
Yeah, I think you're primarily speaking about the social applications. And to be quite frank, I'm still yet to be convinced that this is going to be massive. I think in some form it's going to be, but the question is, like, are the existing applications that we see in Web3 social enough to really overtake the powers of the biggest platforms out there in the Web2 world? I think this is yet to be seen. This battle is not over. So from that perspective, first, we kind of view that complementary, because all of that is really contributing to the overall on-chain social graph. And for us, it just makes what we can do on the UI level and what we can show to the user, say like recommended friends or like who to follow, all of that becomes easier. So Zerion is, just to like make it clear here, we're not going to compete, and not even like trying to compete on becoming the social network of Web3 in this sense. I think there are a lot of players there, and Zerion is, again, closer to what you would think of as an email, where you can have everything. Like, you can really dig to the transactions that you've made and the assets that you hold. So that's the function that a social application doesn't necessarily have. Versus Zerion has some social features, and you can compare that to Venmo in a way, where you can have you don't want to put everything that you do connected with all of the money, or like at least some of the money that you have with your with your online / social identity. So I think this divide is still a little unclear in the space, and my feeling is that we're gonna have. I still feel that these would be a little separate identities and the use cases for the two.
Yeah, I think the Venmo analogy is actually an obvious and kind of perfect one, where I've always found that a little bit creepy. Personally, I always make my Venmo sends private. Sometimes people send me public stuff, though.
Exactly, yeah.
And I always feel the same way about Onchain too. Don't get me wrong, I'm interested to track other people's stuff, but I don't really want other people tracking my stuff. So
yeah, and I think this dynamic is what people didn't really understand yet, especially on Farcaster. I always read these surprise casts where people are like, oh, how could this say a frame figure out how many transactions I did, how much money I have, etc. And for them, it's a big surprise that these two are actually very much connected, and you cannot just. And it gets even creepier, to be honest. If you get your Gnosis Pay card, it's also connected to this identity. So whenever you spend, it becomes a privacy issue. So I think all of that is we're still figuring out as a space, and I think there should be separation between your social and your private financial life, but we don't have the tech for this.
Yeah, I agree with that. And actually, even just thinking about some of these, because I've heard people pitch these ideas for sharing receipts or your transactions. These could be fun new social ways of interacting. And I don't know. I guess when I hear those things, I think those are very consumery, retail, mass market type of products. And when I think about Zerion and kind of maybe where you guys sit in the space, I think you guys are maybe more of like, actually, I'll ask you. I mean, do you guys see yourselves as trying to appeal more to a mass market, new entrant to crypto kind of crowd? Is it more of a crypto native audience that you guys work with? What's your typical demographic of user?
Yeah, I think we've started with primarily focusing on what we call Web3 citizens. And that the idea comes really from, that was a bear market. And we were looking really for the audience that we just had a North Star metric. So our North Star metric is transacting user base. So people who actually are interacting with stuff on chain, because this is where Zerion becomes the most useful. And this audience was very small. So this audience was, just hundreds of thousands of people who are kind of chronically on chain, even if the prices are dampening. At the same time, like recently, we've seen that it is becoming more and more accessible. So actually, Zerion is changing from that regard, and we're now expanding the market in some sense, where users can, and with Zero, and we'll talk about that more, we believe that on-chain reality will be more and more appealing to the mass user rather than previously it was just constrained by the fees primarily and the complexity of the UX. So I think this is changing now, and we're finally ready to make the leap in this sense.
Yeah, so when you say expanding, you're talking about more of the kind of new entrants coming into the space rather than just the Web3 citizens, kind of crypto native folks that are here.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just to add one thought to this. Expanding the on-chain does not necessarily mean expanding into like completely everybody, because I think crypto is still lacking some of the use cases that are appealing to the mass audience. But at the same time, the crowd that is interested in the technology and not even technology, the use cases that we have already, which have product market fit in some sense, which is like tokens and basically tokenization of anything is probably the biggest PMF of the crypto space, and that attracts already hundreds of millions of people. Most of them are currently sitting on exchanges for the lack of tooling, complexity of the on-chain UX, and everything related to that. So I think what we mean by expanding is focusing more on the user base who's ready to onboard in the on-chain world. So make their like crypto journey primarily focused on the wallet experience, not on the finance experience.
Absolutely makes sense. Well, so let's talk about the wallet piece for a second there. So as you mentioned, you guys started as a portfolio tracker, and then I think launched the mobile wallet within the past year or 2 years ago, and maybe
2 years ago.
2 years ago, and then the desktop wallet, I think, within the past year.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a space with a lot of competitors, from the behemoths like Metamask to tons of new entrants as well. Where do you guys see some of the places where you've tried to differentiate on either the wallet either the mobile or desktop side?
Yeah, first I would say, and that's great news for us, there are not too many new entrants in the wallet space. It used to be like that. So about 2 years ago, like a lot of people were considering trying to scale their own wallets. I think this is not the case anymore. I actually don't see a lot of like the new interests with significant traction, and that makes sense. I think like the market is in some sense consolidating behind the biggest players. In terms of our differentiation, we started off by being the best mobile experience. So we've had the mobile application, and when it comes to transacting users, we've been one of the primary ones. At least like for this group of Web3 citizens. And we really leaned onto that. So the wallet we started on mobile, and that's why like majority of our user base is still on iOS and Android. And the goal there was that mobile wallet experience was just completely terrible,
Yes.
in the simple words. And to a certain degree, there's still challenges with the mobile experience when it comes to app interactions, but this is getting solved, and I think this is already like now becoming the norm, that it's like better. It's already feasible to have different applications connecting to your mobile wallet. Like, a good example would be Farcaster with Coinbase Wallet, kind of seamless integration. So I think this is becoming finally a norm. And coming back to the differentiation, our biggest value add as a wallet was in the portfolio tracking experience. And this has been the core of Zerion for a while, essentially. So the Zerion is not just the provider of like the wallet itself, the interface, but part of that, there's a huge backend operation that is happening. And so we need to index all of these blockchains. We need to aggregate all of this data connected to your public address in one place, so you can have the best experience ever when exploring the on-chain, making transactions. So all of that is like, it's not so visible, but this is what constitutes Zerion. And when we started, we just figured that like, okay, we have most of the users coming from MetaMask looking to get and understanding how much money they have in their portfolios. And we figured that this would be the differentiation that would matter for a lot of people. And this is still the case. So most of our new users are still onboarding from existing wallets, so converting like their previous wallets in and switching over to Zerion. And I think like from the wallets in our category, there are just a few who are doing a better job than it's like say the biggest industry players.
Yeah, I do think there's so much low hanging fruit in some of these categories. Obviously, I still use MetaMask from time to time, just because I have some applications. And it is shocking.
You don't actually have to anymore.
Well, maybe it's just PTSD or something then. I feel like it's the quickest connection
yeah, so
in cases,
yeah, exactly. So this is the biggest complexity of the wallet space. I think people are reluctant to switch because there's so much trust put in a certain brand, because this is, again, the financial stuff that you have in your wallet. So you don't want to just, kind of like with banks, you never leave your bank, yeah.
Correct. I've had to do like full wallet transfers in the past where I move all of my NFTs and stuff from one wallet to another wallet. You don't have a better security setup or something. It's terrifying. I mean, there's no easy way around it. So I guess on that, so you guys have worked a lot on the mobile side. It sounds like where a lot of your wallet user base is today. You guys have a beautiful experience there. What are still some of the biggest unsolved UX, UI challenges for non-custodial wallet experiences? Where are there still these big opportunities to go tackle there?
I'm not sure this is an opportunity for like new entrants to the market, but obviously for a lot of the existing wallets, and everybody is already working on that, is account obstruction. And I think this is where, after that point, that would be the end of the ledger era for crypto security. Because I think like with account obstruction, you can achieve the setups that are actually more secure than hardware wallets, without really compromising on the user experience. So I think this is going to be the future. We're still in a way not there, and Zero is making a step towards that. But obviously, like this will be the game changer in a big way. And obviously, yeah, smart wallet by Coinbase is the move in the right direction. And who else? Like Safe is also working on creating like a more retail focused account abstraction.
Yeah, I believe their card experience that you mentioned earlier just sort of makes all of that extremely easy for users. And I'm not European, so I don't have one of those cards, but I think it's just sort of a seamless flow. It automatically creates the safe. You can fund that and then spend from there directly. But very nice. Have you guys looked into that as well? Like trying to allow people to transact from their on-chain wallets? I don't even understand fully how that works technically. But
yeah, we've actually run an experiment with Gnosis Pay a few weeks ago when we collaborated to get some people like early access to the Gnosis Pay cards for free. And we've got a lot of claims, and people started testing this out. So it's not a massive use case yet, but I think it's going to be at some point, like and especially as we integrate that more closely. And the good thing is that you can track all of your, in some sense, accounts, say your main account as well as your Gnosis Pay account in Zerion, and we haven't done that integration, so like it's all pretty rough right now. But you are able to do that, so you can like just say, kind of like with Revolut, just move money from your main account to your card account. So this is how you fund it, and you can just go ahead and spend it, and it works great. And kudos to the Gnosis Pay team for creating like a really great experience there. They're yet to launch in the US, so we'll see about that. But I think that's going to be like one of the main, I guess, like, driving factors in like some near future, because previously people were reluctant to spend their crypto. And I think this is becoming more of a norm, kind of blending the your on-chain world and your investments in crypto with your day-to-day finance. And with the rise of stable coins and everything else related to like DeFi merging a little bit with CeFi, I think this is all happening in parallel.
Yeah, I particularly think some of the yield-bearing assets are very interesting for this, whether it's an SDAI or an SFRAX, or on Gnosis Chain, they have SXDAI, which has even higher yield than SDAI, but even just the idea of kind of being able to live entirely off the yield of some of these things, I think is a really cool premise that, with some great marketing campaigns and use cases, like I think it'd really get people excited about spending crypto.
Yeah, and it can compete with the offerings that you get from standard neobanks. Like finally, I know it's still a little bit off in terms of the UX, but there's a pathway now at least to that, and the yield that you can get on like basically anywhere in crypto is higher than what you can get even like in the current market conditions. It used to be even better, like on DeFi yields.
Totally. So I guess riffing a little bit more on kind of the business of Zerion, I saw, I think, a tweet from one of your colleagues who said that March was an all-time high month for you guys in terms of wallets, transactions, API usage, and subscriptions, something like that. So congratulations, I guess. And maybe April, May have been even better. I don't know. But
they were like similar.
Okay, somewhat. Great. Well, still, congratulations. I'm curious to understand kind of the evolution of the business of Zerion as well, right? So today, I think you guys have a paid API, you have pro subscriptions, and then obviously transaction fees through, I guess, the wallet and portfolio tracker. But, how did you guys approach each of those? And, which one came first? Would you have done it differently? Like maybe done the API earlier in a different path? Like, how's that been for you guys thinking about the business?
Great question. So we started with transaction fees on swaps, and that's similar to how most of the people approach that, like most of the wallets approach that. We still charge that, and obviously a lot of users like the convenience of doing that natively, kind of inside the application. A lot of people prefer to pay less fees, and they go to, say, like directly to OneInch or Uniswap and other applications. Even though like Uniswap, for example, is now also charging a fee, which I think a lot of people didn't even know about or don't still know about. And then we've added, so like on the consumer side, we've added the subscriptions, and that happened about half a year ago. So this was in the works for a while, and I think the biggest challenge we faced with subscriptions and like premium membership basically was that there's no infrastructure for that in crypto. Like there's nothing to be building this on, even though like all the payments are connected and everything. It's still a pretty big challenge, which we had to overcome. We had to build our own infra to actually charge, not even recurringly, but at least charge on any network. So this is one of the things that almost didn't exist at the time. We did it primarily to differentiate some of the core user base of like the user base that just does infrequent actions. So this is why like premium became more important, to basically highlight some of the users rather than just the revenue driven. On the API side, we've launched that about just over a year ago. And to your question, we probably should have done that earlier, given how much traction the API is getting. So we're basically signing quite a few contracts per week, just coming like as word of mouth, because different teams are interested in this API. Just given how much work we put in our infrastructure, it makes sense. Like you don't want to be repeating all of that yourself, and especially for the teams who are starting out, it's the easiest way really to get data about any public address on the EVM-like or Ethereum-like blockchains in an aggregated format. So there are honestly like very, very few alternatives to what we can offer. And if you are building an application, you don't want to spend so much time on building out the infrastructure for that. So that's been pretty successful direction. And we have some of the big wallet clients as well, and like Rainbow and Uniswap and Safe and others using the API for their interfaces and their UIs. So we've had great success there, and like a lot of the smaller teams as well are joining. So like we have 300 plus API customers, which is amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. And how do you think about building for those different segments as well, right? The API is obviously more, or is entirely B2B, I imagine. The subscriptions, I imagine, are more kind of prosumer, retail-ish, and then, transactions maybe in that same type of bucket. Is it just everything is kind of synergistic, or are there a lot of different considerations between those different groups?
A lot of it is synergistic, and that's the reason why we decided to do it, because otherwise that would mean splitting the resources too thin. But in our case, Zerion Wallet runs entirely off of the same API, so we kind of can consider ourselves the biggest customer of the Zerion API, and the whole platform team internally is working on the API part, which is like both externally facing and internally facing. We actually don't even draw there's no line in some sense between the two. So that's been kind of easier to maintain than we thought, actually. And coming to the premium subscriptions, like all of that is to us the wallet monetization, and we're not planning to like change anything there. We're just gonna keep doing that while we can. So B2C is this, I think, the standard wallet monetization strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on the API, has there been kind of a killer feature that's attracted all these teams? I guess, just easily kind of querying users' balances and tokens across chains. Sounds like maybe it's the obvious one.
Yeah, that's like half of the usage, and the second half is cross-chain transactions. So you can query in one API request, you can get all of the recent transactions the user did across all chains, and that's very useful for a lot of the dApps that are cross-chain, as well as the wallets themselves, to see like the activity.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's everything I had on Zerion, and now we can kind of get to the fun stuff with Zero here. So I listened to an interview you did almost a year ago. Maybe it was last summer or something. I forget. I forget what podcast it was, but it sounded like maybe the idea for Zero was brewing as far back as then. I would love to get the backstory from you. I guess one of both what Zero is for anyone who doesn't know yet, and then also where the initial idea came from and what convinced you that this was the right path for Zero.
Yeah, and you got me thinking, what could I have said like about a year ago about the direction? But it's interesting for me to like even review that. There will be potentially some like early alpha sitting there. But speaking of Zero, we initially sit down almost a year ago, but it was actually like 9 months ago or so, with the team, and we started thinking, what are the biggest challenges that users are still facing when it comes to on-chain experience? And we identified two pieces. First one was the fragmentation of the user experience, given that how many new layer 2s are being launched. And the second one was really about the gas itself. And we figured that gas is really the biggest challenge that we can tackle, because the chain abstraction and like cross-chain communication is being solved by a lot of players already. And I think that part is going to be figured out somewhat like easily in the short term. And even though like it didn't seem this way like 9 months ago, but we've still decided that it's moving in that direction. Everyone was working on like cross-chain messaging protocols, and we realized that this is definitely going to be solved, and there are clear paths to making that happen. Versus with the gas itself, I think this part is where we didn't have too much experimentation and like novel approaches. So we decided, like, can we solve the problem at the root? Can we create the layer 2 which would not charge any network fees to the end users? And this is how the idea for Zero was born. So Zero is a layer 2 built on top of the ZK Sync stack, which the premise of it is that all of the end users should not pay any gas for on-chain interactions. And this initially will start with Zerion Wallet, and then we're thinking of the ways how we can expand that to like pretty much any other wallet as well. So you're basically like any transaction on Zero feels as smooth as possible. And I guess like with the recent developments of blobs and like 4844 EIP, which brought the cost of the transaction down, it became much more feasible for us to even approach. And I think what's important here to highlight is that the cost is now less of an issue, but the biggest issue is the user experience, that you need to have some external asset that you have no idea usually about. You need to understand that what is the gas token. You need to have it in order to make a transaction, even if you're trying to do a simple thing as claim a free airdrop or mint an NFT. So that really detracts a lot of the potential users from the whole on-chain world, given that like, oh yeah, it's like extra 10 steps that I need to do to fund this chain. I need to bridge. I need to know the gas token. So all of that goes away if you can enable this gasless experience.
Yeah, so I completely agree that the gas piece of crypto is one of the most frustrating probably to wider adoption. I actually had a example recently where I was trying to help a friend onboard who wanted to earn some yield on Arbitrum, and I got him through the whole flow. He sent USDC to his wallet, and then at the end I was like, oh shit, we forgot to send a gas tokens.
Yeah,
back to that. There was Coinbase delays, all of these just things that make the process more difficult. So I agree with that. I guess maybe one thing that surprises me is that I guess if I looked at Zerion today, it feels like Zerion is the perfect place to tackle the fragmentation issue, where you have a user's wallet and balance across all these chains. You can adopt or build some of these, cross-chain messaging systems, and like it feels like you guys are positioned for some of the fragmentation piece. I guess is that still something that you're going after as well, or were you still kind of like so confident that gas was actually maybe the bigger factor that you could tackle?
Yeah, so on the chain abstraction side, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have it. So this is something that, like, I would say any wallet would integrate sooner or later, and it's not going to be a deciding factor for the end user, I believe. So we just felt that we could continue leveraging our existing partners, for example, Socket, to enable this experience. But what became more crucial for us to solve is basically the ecosystem that we can build around the Zero and Zerion itself, where we could, for example, onboard people directly without worrying too much that, otherwise, let's take Base as an example. We don't know what the future of Base holds. We don't know how strict they're going to be with the KYC rules. It doesn't feel as the most permissionless network, even though they're trying to position themselves as such. But I think this is going to be a little tricky for them over time, especially given that the relationship with larger organizations. So in our case, we felt that we could do better, and onboarding to our chain, to the Zero network, would make more sense because we can first verticalize the experience, so we can actually work on streamlining the user experience, and we don't have to take the risk of and even pay otherwise would have to make our users pay the execution fees on someone else's layer 2, and that just didn't feel right. So for us, we can save on the execution cost in this capacity.
I'd like to come back to some of those technical details as well, just how you're going to avoid spam in these situations. But maybe first, because you mentioned kind of building an ecosystem. Obviously, Zerion has been great at building world-class products in crypto. But, having talked to some L2 and L1 teams myself, it seems like the ecosystem building motion is very different. You guys obviously have a strong community, but how do you think about sort of attracting teams to actually build on Zero, attracting new dApps, attracting, on and off ramp partners, stable coins, whatever it might be? How do you think through all of those considerations?
Yeah, I think some of that is straightforward. I'm trying to avoid the word easy, given the relationship that we had with existing on-ramp providers, with existing node providers, and infrastructure-wise, we know pretty much everybody who we need to know to get this over the line. When it comes to the ecosystem building, that's definitely, and you're right, this is definitely something new to us. We haven't done similar kind of work previously. Speaking of the plan here, we're actually, I think the answer here is we got to go more targeted. So instead of trying to do everything at once, we first going to focus on, internally, like we kind of call it creators. And that means anyone creating content in the form of tokens or in the form of NFTs on chain as the first, really most crucial piece. Because we believe that content is what really attracts people to any of these chains, platforms, etc. So it's really about whoever gets the most stuff fresh and new on their chain, rather than necessarily like dApps ecosystem. I think this became pretty funny. Like you go to any layer 2 and there's the same set of dApps everywhere, and users just click through all of them to get an airdrop, and that just became the reality of layer 2 launches. And I think what we can do differently is that we can focus on the core. So instead of focusing on like bringing a lot of dApps for the sake of dApps, we can focus on the people who actually can create some cool, fun experiences. And yeah, we really started centering the Zero conversations around this concept of on-chain fun. So most of the stuff that you do is like in crypto, and especially in the wallets, is not very fun. Just there are only a few examples where it's different. And the major reason, similar to how you were onboarding a friend, it's been primarily around like, oh yeah, you need to bridge gas, and there's this thing that you need to know, and that thing that you need to understand before you can do stuff. So by removing this friction, removing the gas from the equation, and combining that with the UX expertise we have on the wallet level, we can actually streamline the amount of fun that you can get per minute of using on-chain.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that entire concept feels very kind of current in terms of like what I see people getting excited about. I think, maybe fun is tough, and maybe these are more like hyper financialized fun experiences, but I think about some of the stuff that Blast has kind of had their early success with. It does feel like, Fantasy Top and some of the other experiences around there, they're like these hyper financialized fun type of experiences. Now,
yeah, that's right.
For us crypto people, that makes sense, right? I think to a lot of people in crypto, the money part is the fun part, but to a more mainstream audience, perhaps that's not the case. So I guess when you guys are talking about fun, are these things like on-chain games you're focused on, or
no? I would still say that this is like in some form. I think like hyper financialized. I think it's a little moving away from the core of it, but I think it's more about the concept of ownership. So that's why like all the meme coins are so popular, and like they're more popular than at least like getting more traction than Casino, because like obviously meme coins is at least there's something that you own. You feel connected to a network, to some value that you hold, potentially some like just for the fun of it as well. So I think that gives this ownership bit is what matters here. And I think when we're talking about all of this like gaming experience, all of that is still in some way like obviously financial is part of owning something, and which can have value. So to us, this is completely fine. Like obviously Zero is like a permissionless network, so you can deploy anything, and we're not going to restrict anybody from that. And obviously it has to leverage the platform possibilities, like the ability to tokenize anything. It has to be there.
Yeah. So I guess also kind of just thinking through that approach, then it does sound like you guys are going down the route with Zero of trying to have more homegrown original apps and not just, attracting Aave and Uniswap and Compound to the chain.
Yeah, that's right. That's the right way to put it. We're definitely like, we know the plan for the launch. So for the like 6 months, and then beyond, we'll have to see, like the network will have, whatever sticks in some sense will stick, and we'll be happy to iterate. And like as we all know, crypto is evolving a lot every day, and the types of things that people want to do is changing. There's some core to it, and that's why like we believe that having homegrown content is pretty important, because this didn't really change over the last 7 years. So tokenized stuff, like tokens of different varieties, I think, is the true thing that still stayed the same. And that's why focusing on that as early as we can is we feel that the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember maybe 6 or 9 months ago, I just for fun had kind of looked at what the biggest app was on each of the L2s, and then their market cap ratio to the ratio of the chain. And I was actually surprised to realize how many chains, really with the exception of Arbitrum, didn't have a great ecosystem of homegrown apps. Right? It was mostly Aave, and then Aave forks, and then maybe a Uniswap v2 fork, and just kind of like really like a lack of innovation across the L2s, which I think has over time maybe led to some criticism of this L2 world that we're moving into, where people are just kind of launching an L2, making kind of minimal type of changes to whatever the base layer, like a ZK stack or OP stack or whatever, and then just launching the same kind of forks. So I applaud the approach that you guys are taking, both in terms of, I think, one of the newer stacks and then trying to grow a new set of applications as well.
Yeah, and as I said previously, I think we're approaching this, I would say, saturation or understanding of what constitutes the most important pieces of the ecosystem. So I think there's nothing surprising about that. So if we compare, say, we take the phones, right? Phones before iPhone started with a lot of things on them. There are different types of games. There are different types of phone books, SMS, then some browsing experience. And it became clear what are the bits that you need for the daily operating of the layer 2. And I think now this is a standard. So we don't even need to create a different set of things because a lot of the innovation kind of happened already. And what we need to do instead is focus on the content instead. And this is what we're trying to bridge in with Zero 2. So instead of, say, having a meaningless dApp that the sole purpose of it just to get some farmers to get something, that's just not as exciting. At the same time, if we can get token creators and games is a much more appealing, I think, to me, concept where we can actually start experimenting more with the types of content that people are actually interested in, not just yet another fork of something to swap and get the token.
Totally. And I guess really with L2s, just given the fact that you guys have such a prevalent mobile wallet, is there anything that you're thinking around maybe some of the mobile tie-ins for some of these as well? I mean, I don't even know how that would work in practice, but some kind of mobile game that's based on Zero, and I don't know, I'm just rambling ideas there. Yeah,
mobile is definitely going to be a key part of the launch. So we'll have all of this available on mobile from the start. We haven't formulated yet exactly, I should say, this is primarily about guidelines in terms of what kind of applications are, how exactly do we show certain applications running on Zero. This is work in progress, I would say. And the way I'm thinking about it is that over time, we can have a more integrated experience inside the mobile application. So instead of that being click here and get an open a dApp browser, instead it could be more closer to what Toon is doing with mini apps that are rendering inside the application. So we're looking into that right now and how exactly we want to do it. But I think that directionally this is where it's headed. So it has to be more native, and a wallet can do much more in terms of user onboarding and security validation. And this is the job of the wallet, to protect the user. And then the app can focus on what dApps do best. So the actual fun part.
Interesting. Yeah, I've used a few of the Toon applications, and more than anything, I've just been blown away by the stats I've seen of what this hamster racing thing and Notcoin. I mean, the number of users these things have apparently have, and I'm sure it's bot farms and whatever in some cases, has been pretty mind blowing. I mean, these are unbelievable numbers for any other crypto application.
Yeah, this is we've been joking about it as well, how this is the ultimate crypto UX, click and get money. This is just 2 steps to get to the goal. I think this is very interesting what is happening with Toon. I don't know how long it's going to last. It's obviously a big group of people who are interested in getting early exposure to some meme coin products, and there's nothing wrong about it. We all were there at some point. I think with Zero philosophy, we've been thinking about this idea of we all started at zero, especially in crypto. Majority of people, this is how it was for a lot of us. We were buying some random coins that did remind more of the meme coins, even though they had some doing ICOs or doing some airdrops. All of that was kind of zero in the beginning. So I think from that perspective, Toon is doing great. I think they're onboarding a bunch of people to this concept of owning something in the digital world, getting something for basically the value of the networks as well. I think that's another important bit, like the value of community and how much power it can have. So yeah, only the good things I can say about their user onboarding. I think one potential problem that we see here is reliance on Telegram as the only distribution platform. So this is something that I guess would need to be reconsidered over time by the network participants. So much reliance is a little terrifying. I think it's similar to Base and Coinbase relationship.
Interesting. I hadn't kind of thought about that, but that makes sense. So a few other questions, I guess, maybe on the tech stack of Zero as well. So you mentioned that you guys are going to be using the ZK Sync stack or the ZK stack, which I think is pretty brand new. I don't know if you guys will be a Hyperchain, which I believe is their kind of terminology. What made you decide to work with them? Obviously there are some trade-offs, I think, with sort of the full EVM compatibility and just, some different developer work, but obviously the ZK element. So would be really curious how you guys landed there.
Yeah, and you're spot on with, I guess this goes into technicalities of it. But when we first started looking into the stacks, we only looked at the major ones, and ZK Sync was actually not part of the initial research we did. So we looked at OP and we looked at Arbitrum as the two primary candidates. But eventually, after speaking with, first spoke with Stani, and he was the first to really tell us about the ZK Sync stack existence and that they're planning to do that. And then we started speaking more. Yeah, Stani from Lens. Yeah, and then we started talking more with the ZK Sync team and Alex himself, the founder of Matter Labs, and we realized that it has the components that we really need to make what we want to happen. So the biggest one was native account abstraction. So we wanted to create this seamless flow, so you don't need to switch to a new wallet, because that always is associated with first friction of migrating the assets. You need to move the assets to this new wallet address, and then you need to somehow track it. So I think a lot of people are reluctant to doing that. And second, it basically has all the account abstraction benefits that we wanted to do in terms of gas sponsorship. So we could preserve the same public address while creating a much more seamless experience when transacting on Zero. And that made a compelling case. It removed quite a lot of work that we would otherwise have to do in terms of user onboarding, migration of assets, and everything related to that. And we were not compelled by the 4337 to really make a leap into that direction. And I actually still feel that this was the right choice, because with all the stuff that is happening right now with Ethereum is 3074 AIP about migrating EOAs to smart accounts, and all of the subsequent AIPs proposed by Vitalik. All of that is moving us in the right direction. I think we wouldn't need to re-onboard people to 4337. We could just progress as an ecosystem, and that's going to take time, though. Yeah, when we looked at ZK Sync again, this was that was probably the biggest reason. And the second one was scalability. So in terms of how much data is posted by the rollup, ZK Sync is doing state differences instead of kind of writing all of the transactions directly. And in the longer term and at higher TPS, it can achieve a much more optimized performance. And for us, that matters a lot, because we are going to sponsor some of the transactions on the Zero network. So yeah, that's these two things are probably the most important ones.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I also in some sense kind of see a synergy of why a team like the ZK Sync team would want to work with you guys, because I do think that for users, there might be, at least today, it feels like there's a bit of additional friction to use ZK Sync, maybe compared to Optimism or Arbitrum or Base or something. But given your guys, I think, expertise in building great user experiences, building a mobile wallet. I imagine that's very appealing to the ZK Sync ecosystem as well. So it kind of goes both ways, I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, for them, obviously, working with Zerion is definitely a plus. So it's a win-win relationship. And just for the record, like, have a lot of respect for the Optimism guys, as well as Arbitrum. I think like with OP, we're yet to see the path forward to super chain ecosystem and how like these chains are going to cross operate. Yeah. But these questions are always like up in the air. I think evolution never stops really. So ZK Sync hopefully like will deliver on all of the premises that they've set with their stack. So we do feel that this is going to be a major win for us for like the Zero launch. Yeah, and hopefully we can even help the ZK Sync ecosystem as well by contributing to it and like bringing in more dApps and content really.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the piece there around super chains, and I guess the ZK equivalent are the hyperchains. So my understanding is that once the hyperchain kind of architecture is at its full state, someone on Zero would be able to easily interact with, let's just say, the Lens chain, which I think is also going to be there, or ZK Sync Era. I always forget the names itself. Yes. So I guess, how do you think about how the Zerion, the wallet, fits into that as well, right? I mean, today at least, I guess, will you have kind of like segmented experiences within the wallet? So if all users on Zero, they have no gas fees and they can also interact with some of these other hyperchains. But then if they're still doing stuff on mainnet or wherever else, it's a different kind of flow. How does that all fit together?
Yeah, we're not planning to make a different flow for ZK Sync specifically. And the reason here is that we're still on the wallet level, we're very agnostic to the chains that people want to use. So we're not going to restrict, like, as much as like our capabilities allow, we'll be integrating as many chains as possible, including non-EVM ones, because otherwise we're restricting what people actually want to do inside the wallet. So that's not really our job. In terms of what we can optimize, we will be optimizing. So say like the bridging experience between hyperchains is going to be much faster and cheaper. So that part is definitely we're going to make use of. And lastly, on the Zero side, this is where we can optimize the most in terms of the UX. So because of this vertical integration, whether Zero will be part of the hyperchain. So we're aiming to be part of the chain from day one. If this is going to be feasible in terms of the timeline on both sides. We're working through that at the moment. So we have, hopefully by the time this airs, we already have the testnet live. And we're working with the ZK Sync to like really align the timelines on the launch of the hyperchain, because we're still work in progress on many things on their end too. But yeah, ideally we would want to be part of the hyperchain ecosystem because that gives additional benefits and really no downsides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually, as I've looked at a lot of these L2 ecosystems, whether it's superchains or hyperchains, or I'm sure Arbitrum has a name too that I'm just forgetting, I actually think it's kind of tough to be part of these ecosystems without being a part of that sort of, I don't know what the right word would be, like privileged class or something of, first class, other chains using the tech stack. I just think it makes it tougher for adoption kind of broadly. So yeah, I totally makes sense there. I guess one last question kind of on the technical side of this is, in practice, and I'm just going to ask this question in the most naive way possible, what is the business model of Zero if not gas fees? And how do you avoid spam if not charging users for?
Yeah. So this is where the economics of gas fees are at play. So our thinking was that a lot of the transactions that are happening on chain, most of them are actually spam transactions. And we can see that how, like, from our experience running the indexers, we know that most of the stuff that you get in your wallet, these are like spam NFTs, spam tokens, and things like that. And someone has to pay for that. And if you want to, and it becomes really the cost of advertising in some sense. So it's kind of like a CP, not even click, but like cost per view type of metric, where users just like say some developers send like a lot of NFTs, and that's completely okay too. Like airdrops are a big use case in this sense. So we're not going to sponsor these types of activities. So on our end, we understand that like there are automated things that you do with the chain, like running bots or again, like sending this mass tokens. And there are things that people actually do on chain. And there's only as many things that you can do as a human being. And from that perspective, we started thinking about very classic spam prevention system. So you look at like Cloudflare, right? So they allow you, they don't charge you every time you're trying to like open a Google Doc or like every time you're posting on Facebook because they don't need to. They have other ways to monetize that. So we decided to kind of flip the economics here. And the funding for the fees is going to come from first the people who are actually paying for sending like this mass, like NFTs and like anyone who's running bots. So basically anything that we're not sponsoring will be coming off the pocket of the users, of the like stakeholders, I don't know, network participants. And that is going to be redistributed to fund the kind of more I guess simple actions by end users.
Interesting. All right. So if I'm understanding that correctly, through your work at Zerion, you've realized most of or a good chunk of on-chain transactions are spam, mevbots, whatever. And that the actual percentage of, quote unquote, real or kind of productive transactions is not as cost prohibitive as you might have otherwise thought. So the thinking with Zero is subsidizing real user transactions. I'm guessing like by kind of having some process where apps or something can get, the kind of sponsorship, and then subsidizing that with spam, essentially.
Yeah. Huh. That's right. And then there's a second part to it. So this is all going to be like testing as we progress. So this is obviously subject to change. But second part is like the assets sitting on the bridges as well. So the yield that is generated, that could be also used towards the same thing. So basically all of the stuff that network can earn kind of collectively can be used to really fund the end user activity while keeping it open for everybody, keeping it permissionless. Because if Zerion, say, decides not to sponsor a transaction, that's not the end of the world. And as we even decentralize that, you would still be able to submit a transaction by paying the gas. So it's always going to be there. It's kind of like the backbone of the permissionlessness of the system versus us like censoring potentially any kind of transaction if we're not submitting it or like sponsoring it. So that's how we want to tweak it to make the economics a little different. So we just feel that doesn't make sense, right? Like to charge end users for these transactions.
Yeah, I personally think that's one of the more exciting aspects of L2, which is just obviously there are these giant pools of capital and, in terms of the bridge and fees, and it's great to see teams experimenting. I think obviously Blast kind of kicked that off with investing funds from the bridge, and what you guys are now doing on the transaction fee side sounds extremely novel as well. And as a user, I'm very excited to try it out.
Me too, to be honest.
Yeah. But thanks. I've got one more thing to kind of wrap up with here, but I guess before we come to the close, is there anything I haven't asked about Zero or Zerion that you'd be interested to share or talk more about?
That's a good question. I think one thing that we didn't discuss is really how we think about the on-chain identity piece and the Zerion DNA specifically. So I don't know if you've looked into that, or maybe you hold one of the DNAs already. But we have
the NFTs.
Yeah, like DNA stands for Dynamic NFT Avatar. So this is like the Zerion. I wanted to say one and only, but it's actually not one and only. But it's the only one that we still maintain and care about is the DNA collection. And the DNA collection is like the way we formulated that for ourselves is more of the aggregation of your Zerion identity on chain. And we're planning to give create a second version of it focused on Zero. So DNAs are going to be migrated over to Zero network, and we're going to have some more on-chain attributes to the DNA. So previously DNAs were primarily like the image of it was coming off of the backend. So the attributes as well were coming off of the backend. This is how most collections work apparently. But we felt that this is not giving us the ecosystem the flexibility to use it outside of the Zerion context. And with the next version of the DNA, it's going to be more possible because like this on-chain bits that you can actually write on chain, you can start reusing some of that information in other applications. And an example would be a dApp can fetch the level of the DNA that the user has, and that can mean something for the dApp. So for example, they can have a certain type of discount or like a certain experience that is only unlocked by a certain level of the DNA. So, and we'll have Zerion premium users, and that part we can also put on chain such that other applications can infer that this is a premium user. So things like that can become building blocks for the ecosystem that other people can rely on. We're excited about bringing DNA and giving it a new life on Zero. Kind of saying bye to the Ethereum gas fees for minting. I think our users spent over 500,000 on just minting the DNAs, and that's pretty insane. So, like, how much value is left on the table in some sense.
Right. Interesting. Well, that's a different way of thinking about on-chain identity, I think, as well, right? It's much more based on your actions, what you've done, rather than any sort of KYC or linkage.
Yeah,
in that respect.
Yeah, we really wanted to avoid that, to be honest. So with on-chain identity, like coming back to this prevention of illegitimate transactions on chain, we ideally want to merge the systems together. So the DNA identity, or like the levels that you have on the DNA, to prove that you've been your transactions are legitimate, or you're like a real user based on your on-chain on-chain activity, we can start giving that to other folks working in the space. So like other dApps can rely on this fact that this is most likely a legitimate user.
Huh. I love that. And I guess there are actually kind of other quasi things, right? I mean, if someone on or off ramp from Bitso, maybe you can assume they're a Latin American user, Coinbase, I don't know, whatever country they are. I guess they have a lot of countries, so it's a little tougher, but there's kind of quasi, perhaps, things you could work in.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm excited to see how that all plays into Zero as well. So I guess as we're coming to the close, we're recording this towards the end of June here. When can people expect the first opportunities to get involved with Zero? When are you targeting a mainnet? I won't ask when you're launching a mainnet. When are you targeting a mainnet, testnet?
Yes.
How can people start playing around with the network?
Yeah, so testnet is actually planned very soon. So this is going to be June 27th. Let's see if we can stick to the date.
Right.
And how badly do we miss? On the mainnet, I can say that we're targeting early fall to launch the mainnet.
Great. All right. Well, hopefully we'll be able to publish this episode then right on June 27th or 28th, right alongside that testnet.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that you would point users to just to get involved, stay involved? Is there Discord? Obviously, I'm sure there's Twitter.
Yeah, there's definitely Discord. There's first the website. So it's Zerion.io. For Zero Network, we actually, this was like single most expensive domain purchase that we did. We bought a Zero.network domain. You can head there. There's not much, but you can expect more things to drop there as we release the testnet with primary focus on building on top of Zero. And there's Twitter. It's at Zerion. You can find most of the info there. And Zerion.io/community is the link to getting involved with our community or becoming an ambassador.
Awesome. All right, Evgeny, well, thank you for all the time today. To anyone who's made it this far, definitely check out all of these different links. I mean, Evgeny didn't pay all that money for Zero.network for nothing, so go check out the site. And, as the testnet's live, figure out a way to get involved.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks again for all the time today.